So as far as the Patriot movement, and that's what LWN is, we are part of many patriots out there searching for the truth and delivering the news like it should be delivered. All right. Welcome, Warriors, World Patriots, my fellow Americans. My name is Mike. I'm the host of Liberty Warrior. Give me liberty or give me death. When tyranny becomes law, rebellion becomes duty. It is Wednesday, July the 20th, 2022. Boy, I got a show for you guys. I've been asking a lot of questions, been searching for a lot of answers. And, we had Andy try to get on last Thursday for Ladies of Liberty, and his service just wasn't a strong enough signal. And he had a lot to say. I talked to him behind closed doors here, and he says, boy, wait till I give you the stuff that we have found out. So pretty excited to have Andy aboard here with Miles Franklin. If you guys are interested in silver or gold, now's the time to buy. I just asked Andy what spot price before we came live. It's still under $19 an ounce. So if you guys want to check that out, go to info@milesfranklin.com. Use promo code libertywarriornation, and you can help yourself out. You can help me out at the same time. Also, to add to the flames to the fire tonight, we got the one, we got the only, we got SNAFU. He's joining Andy and I tonight, and it should be a great conversation. So with that being said, let me go ahead and welcome both of these wonderful gentlemen in tonight. Andy, as always, good to see you. And Scott, SNAFU, brother, good to hear your voice.
Good to be here, Mike. Where are you, Scotty?
Hey, I'm right here.
I don't see you. You hiding?
He got me hid.
All right.
They keep me in the closet. So
we only let him out on special occasions. Well,
I have
understood.
I had to thank Denise because the link I got was broken, so I had to call her real quick. It's like, send me another link, send me another link. So she bailed me out at the last minute again.
Well, that's good that I've been sending her the link every time now, just in case we have those issues. And Denise, she is one of the hardest working people I know behind the scenes, just cranking it out each and every day. And we got a great team here at LWN, and it's always a pleasure to have Andy with Miles Franklin here. He's part of the team as well. He's always here supporting us and helping us out, and we appreciate that, Andy. And then, of course, Scott. Everybody loves to hear from SNAFU, and it's going to be man, I'm telling you, I have a feeling. Buckle up, folks, because there's a lot of information that these two gentlemen are going to put out tonight. And like I said, I've been paying attention to everything going on in the news, everything going on around the world. A lot of stuff unfolding right before our eyes. And it's just amazing that there are people still out there saying nothing's going to happen and nothing's happening. And I feel sorry for those folks because it is happening. And Andy has some stuff that he'll share with us tonight, what he sees going on. And pay attention, folks. This is great information. This is foresight. Andy's been in the business for a very long time. He is a professional. Scott, the same thing. Scott's been around the block a time or two, with cracked windshields and everything else. So he's had his hand in lots of controversy with law enforcement. If you guys remember Andy, Scott's first story, his video that went viral, that was pretty neat to see see that video get so many views. And then Scott just kind of took off. So it's a pleasure having both of you. So, gentlemen, whoever would like to start, wherever you'd like to start, I'm ready to get it.
Go for it, Scotty.
Well, talking about that, I had one of the guys, because I talk to a lot of people and they say, "Oh man, you woke me up to all this and all this," and I hear that all the time. Well, I had a show with his friend of mine. I used to be his call screener back in 2015 for Rule of Law Radio, and his name's Eddie Craig. The show's going to be out in the morning. He's the one that woke me up to talking about the law. He was an ex-sheriff's deputy back in the day. And he can cite the law. I mean, he goes into code. He has it all committed to memory. And all that stuff I was talking about, 201.904, about speed signs and stuff, he breaks it down. I used to go to his classes back then. I'd drive from Dallas to Austin and spend time down there. And it's going to be a good show in the morning. I've been waiting about 3 months. We had lunch just yesterday. I told him, I said, man, I got to get you on, because he moved up here to Dallas and stuff. So that's the guy who woke me up to all this. And has no problem riding my butt, so it was kind of fun, man. Let him sit there and ride my ass like a $2 horse. And I was like, yeah, I know. But, hell, I was doing what I could, man. So, but that's the guy that woke me up way back then. So I have to give some props to old Eddie Craig. So anyhow, that's all I got for that.
Eddie Craig, if you're listening tonight, thanks for waking SNAFU up, because you waking him up woke tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. I ran SNAFU about a year ago, and he enlightened me a little bit as well. So, Andy, go ahead, brother, if you're ready.
Well, I got a lot to talk about this evening since we last talked, and we can tackle it one or two ways. It's interesting. A lot of the things that I brought up on Scott's show a year ago and on your show several months ago on the first time we were together are unfolding in many respects much faster than I thought they would have. And sometimes it almost freaks me out that it's happening. I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but I still don't hear people talking about it. And yet it continually is happening, whether it be what's going on with the BRICS nations, what's going on with Saudi Arabia, what's going on with the massive de-dollarization that continues day by day by day. And every day there's more to add on to the story that we've already talked about on your show and Scott's show quite a bit. And it's astonishing to me that the things that I was saying, because it made so much sense to me, are playing out right in front of us. And so whether you want to talk about why the silver market is behaving the way that it is first, or talk about BRICS, either one is fine with me. Both of them are really interesting right now. I'll tell you what. Why don't we start with what's going on in the metals market? And this is a little bit of it's an interesting story, and I want people to try to pay attention best they can. First, we're going to start with the premise, and the premise is that when we talk about the London Metals Exchange, okay, it's a 140-year-old exchange. So when a customer is not able to meet a margin call for whatever reason, due to, let's call it, an adverse market movement, the customer's broker is obliged to meet the call to the clearinghouse, to meet that margin call, to make good on behalf of the client. But if the broker doesn't have enough cash to satisfy that margin call, then it's the other members of the clearing association that have to, they're called upon to pony up the cash. And this is done to keep the exchange solvent. And it guarantees the credibility of the exchange. All right. So that needs to be first in mind. So, it's a 140-year-old exchange, and it is the preeminent exchange, especially for base metals in the world. So I want to talk about a set of circumstances that are so ridiculously coincidental that I believe it's almost impossible to be purely coincidental. And when I get to the end of this, I think you're all going to see that maybe, just maybe, this time we're going to see the prices of gold and silver do things that I think people will be surprised by. And then we'll talk about the BRICS nations and what's happening. And here again, that's accelerating at a massive speed. But all right, so we go back to March 8th of this year. There was a nickel contract on the COMEX, on the LME. And if you remember, the nickel market price went straight up. There was a massive short player on the exchange. And this was, I believe, a Chinese company, a big one. And huge short position. And when the price went up, this trade was starting to go sideways fast. And instead of making good on the trade, the exchange did something they had never done in 140 years. And they basically sided with the big short. They canceled all of the trades, and they more or less defaulted on the position. There are people that made millions of dollars, and it's like, sorry, yeah, you were on the right side of the trade, but we're going to cancel it, and sorry. And this is a really big deal. It's never happened before in the history of the exchange. And in essence, instead of backstopping it with all of the members of the exchange, they just basically defaulted on it and stopped trading and reversed all of those trades. Now, this is, imagine if they did this on the New York Stock Exchange or on the COMEX. This is a really big deal, all right? So when we talk about coincidental, here's what I'd like to lay out a little bit of a story for you. But first, it's very important to understand one thing. If I go back as far as I can remember on the COMEX, and the COMEX is the market that sets the price for gold and silver worldwide. And that's, here in the United States, the CME group in Chicago. So typically on the exchange, you have two groups of really big traders. You got the commercial banks that are almost always right. JP, Citi, Goldman. These are the guys with the deepest of pockets. They have all the information. They're the most sophisticated traders on the planet, and also the most crooked. As an aside, we had talked before about JP Morgan manipulating the market and paying a $920 million fine for suppressing the metals market. Right now, there are three traders that are on trial at the moment, facing RICO charges, including Michael Nowak, who is the head of the metals desk at JP Morgan. They did north of 50,000 what's called spoofing trades, which is where you enter a huge trade to make the market appear that it's going in a certain direction, and then cancel the trade at the last second and screw everyone and make your trade either long or short better than it would otherwise be. In fact, in Bloomberg today, there was an article saying that the guy who came from Bear Stearns, who showed them all how to spoof, his fingers moved so fast that they thought that it needed to be put in ice, that it was the fastest thing they'd ever seen. And clicking his mouse, click. The manipulation of the COMEX market is a real deal. And if you look at the position, the size of the concentrated short position on the commercial banks, who are almost always winning the battle, and they're almost always short, always. It's the that go long almost always, right? Those are the hedge funds. You get the hedge funds and the commercials. Commercials are always short. The hedge funds are always long. Hedge funds are betting for higher prices. The commercial banks take that bet and throw so much short on it that all the money that they put in premium to buy options or contracts end up expiring worthless because the commercial banks short the hell out of the market all the time, making all of us frustrated as to why in an environment where there's war and inflation and craziness that metals aren't going up. And that's kind of the backdrop for which I bring this up to you. So on the same day, March 8th, that the nickel failure happened, we had gold at its all-time high of $2,080. And the price of silver was $27.50. That was the highest it had been since June of 2021. All right. Since those price highs, since that day, gold has fallen $350, almost $400, over 20%. And silver has fallen even more by about $9, over 30%. And this is a big, big, big drop. And so much of it is counterintuitive. In that same day, on March 8th, concentrated short positions of the 4 largest traders in gold amounted to 18.8 million ounces, or 188,000 plus contracts. And the concentrated short position in silver is 54,200 contracts, over 271 million ounces. So, and as it turns out, this was the largest concentrated short position on COMEX since March 2020, when they drove the price of silver down to $11. And so you're talking about a position, a short position, massively larger than the nickel short position on the LME. And so since March 8th, the concentrated short position in gold by these traders has fallen by almost 70,000 contracts. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. And in silver, fallen by over 17,000 contracts. And so when we talk about a coincidence, what I am suggesting here is that this was a wake-up call to the commercial banks. And I think it sent a very powerful message to the shorts on COMEX, gold and silver, that they had better get their house in order to reduce these short positions immediately. And what I am contending, namely, is that the big shorts in COMEX, gold, and silver have put in motion a plan to buy back and cover as many of their concentrated short positions as possible. Now, there's a chart that you don't have, but I'd like people to look at it and Google it, and it's the OCC, which stands for the Office of the Comptroller Currency. It's an OCC chart, and if you put into Google the Office of Comptroller Currency derivative position in precious metals 2022, what you're going to see is a chart that goes back 12 years. And every single year, you'll see the short position looks like this, little tiny bit. If you get to the first quarter of 2022, it goes straight off the chart and straight off the chart. I'm talking whatever amount of derivatives they put into play to smash the price because of all that's going on here is extraordinary. But let me explain what they're doing. I do believe they have set the most incredible bear trap I've ever seen. When you look at the latest data, the funds have, the managed money, the commercial banks have cut their short positions by as much as 50%. In fact, in both gold and silver, in fact, it is the smallest short position in the history of the COMEX market, ever. So let me just say that one more time. The entities that have been holding down the price forever have now whittled it down to the smallest short position ever. What they have basically done, in my opinion, is that they have hoodwinked the managed money. When the price reached that level, and with all that was going on, and they throw all of these short contracts at the market, the commercial banks do, the managed money capitulated. The hedge funds gave up, they capitulated. And you're talking, in the last 4 months, the commercial shorts on COMEX, which would be JP, Citi, Goldman, they have bought back more of their short positions in the past 4 months than at any time in history. And as a result, they now hold the lowest commercial concentrated short position ever in the history of the COMEX market. This coincides exactly with the date of the nickel failure. It started dropping immediately. It's as if they said, get your shit in order. You're going to blow up the exchanges. You're going to blow up the banks. Now, wow. I've talked about Chris Marcus and his interview with Bart Chilton, how everyone should Google that. Bart Chilton was the head of the Commodity Future Trading Commission. It's the commodity police. And he admitted to Chris that Bear Stearns went bankrupt when silver went to $21 because they held a massive short position. So banks do go under. Banks do fail when these things go awry, right? So I believe that what the commercial banks have done is hoodwink the managed money. In fact, not only is the lowest concentrated short position ever in gold and silver, it's also the case for COMEX Copper and NYMEX, the New York Mercantile Exchange, in platinum futures. The total net commercial buying over the past 4 months on the sharp and highly deliberate sell-off orchestrated by the commercials has been astounding. They have bought back over 66,000 contracts in silver, over 300 million ounces. They have bought back over 170,000 net contracts, over 17 million ounces in gold. They have bought back over 33,000 net contracts in platinum. That's 1.6 million ounces, and 67,000 copper contracts, or 838,000 tons. The commercial banks have bought all this back. And when the commercials are buying these, that means that the managed money or the hedge funds are taking the other side of the trade. That means the managed money, the hedge funds, who are almost never right, have gone massively short. 300 million ounces in silver represents almost 40% of annual mine supply. This kind of stuff doesn't happen. And so what you have seen is the managed money traders, who always get fleeced, have capitulated to almost 90% of their long positions, which means the commercial banks took the other side. Now, if this didn't coincide directly with the signal failure of the nickel market on the London Metals Exchange, I would think it's just it's more of the same. But what I am getting at is that I think maybe, just maybe, this may be the beginning of the liftoff that we've always talked about. And I would point out that in 2008 and in 2020 and 08, when they drove the price of gold down to 700 and the price of silver from 21 to 9, the position was nowhere near what it is now. And the same thing is true in March 2020 when they drove silver down to $11. But when those positions were nowhere near what they are now in terms of the commercial banks and the lack of short positions. Remember, this is the smallest short position in the history of the COMEX market and the commercial banks ever, right? Also got JP Morgan traders right now on trial facing RICO charges. They are getting rid of their short positions to a level that has never been seen before, meaning the managed money takes the other side of the trade. They are going massively short. And in 2008, after it collapsed, it moved up 2.5 times within 6 months. Fivefold within 2 years. It was in 2020 that things moved up 2.5 times within 6 months after they drove it down to 11. In other words, the commercial banks, they drive the price down so low and everyone thinks it will never go higher, then the commercial banks take the long side and drive the price straight up. And what the commercial banks have been doing for years is what you do not do in finance. You never short a rising market. You short a falling market, like they did in GameStop and they did in AMG, AMC, the movie company. And when the price is falling, if you short it, that means you're selling it. You're adding more fuel to the fire. It keeps on dropping and dropping and dropping. What the commercial banks have been notorious for doing is when the price rises, that means the managed money are buying it, they sucker them in, and then they start to short it because they have deep pockets. And they short it so much that the managed money gives up and it goes the other way. And they just keep pickpocketing the managed money. The signal failure on the LME, the default on the nickel contract, to me was a wake-up call, because all of this coincides to the day with this happening. And right now, the commercial banks are poised for a run-up in metal that I have never, ever, ever seen before. And I would simply say that I would expect this to be a massive, massive rally. What all that really matters right now, number one, they have suckered the managed money into the largest short position they've ever had in metals. And conversely, the most well-funded, well-informed, sophisticated, well-funded traders on the planet are as long as they have ever been in the history of the COMEX market. And with the scrutiny right now that the regulators are putting on these traders, it's almost as if they realize, when all of us have been screaming manipulation forever, the last thing that they could ever have happen. And remember, The short position in gold and silver has been many times what it was in nickel. The last thing that they could have is to have all of the exchanges blow up. It would throw egg in the face of the regulators, of the CFTC, of the SEC, of the exchanges, of the whole 9 yards. And it's really like they've done the ninjutsu move, and they have hoodwinked the hedge funds into taking this massive short position, thinking that gold and silver aren't going to go any higher, and they are gambling that to epic proportions that they're right. The commercial banks are saying otherwise. Now, all that really matters this time is if they don't short it as the price rises. They're in position to make huge money, huge profit, if they just stand aside and let the price go to the moon as it starts to rise, and these hedge funds have to start to cover. And if they actually add to their long positions as this happens, it'll put these hedge funds out of business. It'll add rocket fuel underneath the price of gold and silver. So this OCC chart, this Office of Comptroller Currency chart, if you look at it and see the amount of derivatives they put on the first quarter of 2022, the commercial banks, to drive the price down, it's like a giant snowball that they pushed down the hill hard. And it started getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And by the time it got a quarter of the way down the hill through the first quarter, the commercial banks flipped because the hedge funds were going, we're done, we're out, short, sell. And when they were selling, the commercial banks were buying. When they are shorting, commercial banks take the opposite side of the trade. So the commercial banks are loading up on long as the hedge funds have capitulated, and now the commercial banks are in the most bullish position they have ever been in the history of the commodity exchange. This is not something that should be taken lightly, and it also explains why the price has done so poorly over the past 2 months in an environment where it should have been better. The truth of the matter is the price is controlled by the COMEX market. If I were a betting man, I would say that in the very near future, you're going to see an explosion in both gold and silver and in platinum and in copper as the commercial banks, which have just been the lid on the rising prices, have backed off and in fact opened the lid. This is a really, really, really big deal. And
yeah, and
so
you're not the only one, Andy, out there explaining why gold and silver are low right now, why they're manipulated, and it's the banks selling off their shorts, which pushes the price down. They can only sell what they have, and once they run out, it's game over. So this is a pretty serious. This is a serious warning that Andy is putting out there tonight to you guys to really pay attention. For those of you who already have in possession gold and silver, do not sell. Hold on to that stuff because I think that I think it's going to start rising here real soon.
And to Rebecca, it is the commercial banks that are in the best possible position, not the hedge funds. The hedge funds are walking on thin ice that's about to break, and it could literally bankrupt many of them with the huge positions that they have. Now, one other thing, and then I'll defer to Scott and answer any questions. You know, I've talked a lot with you guys about, oh, by the way, just as an aside, I think it's interesting to note that it was today reported that the Ukrainian central bank acknowledged that $12 billion worth of their gold reserves were recently sold in order to fund the war with Russia. Geez, I wonder who took that gold. I wonder who has that gold. But, you know, it was recent. A lot of the things that we've talked about on your show and on Scott's show regarding the BRICS nations and what that really means. Things are growing by the day. Let me just name a few of them. 2 days ago, India came out and said, you know, we're their largest trading partner. India said all domestic trades from now on will be done in rupee, not in dollars. Now, international trades, they'll still do in dollars, but all domestic trades will be done in rupees. We just heard the other day that, as you mentioned, Iran has indeed joined the BRICS nation, so as well. But get this one. Saudi Arabia is in negotiations to join the BRICS nations. Remember, I told you how significant it is. You know, I ask people every day, what makes the dollar world reserve currency? No one ever knows. It is the protection of the Saudi kingdom that makes the dollar the world reserve currency. When we closed the gold window in 1971, meaning that the countries could no longer exchange their dollars for gold at a fixed rate of $35, Nixon closed it, made it fiat. 3 years later, Henry Kissinger flew to Saudi Arabia and said, we will protect you, Saudi Arabia, but for that privilege, you're going to denominate oil globally in dollars forever. And for the last 50 years, every country on the planet has had to own dollars. We talked about how Saudi Arabia signed a joint military cooperation agreement with Russia. Then Nigeria did the same thing. We've talked about how Nigeria is now selling their oil to China for yuan, and Saudi Arabia is in negotiations to do that. This is a very, very big problem. So when you see right now the fact that, oh, and by the way, Iran is now going to be dealing with Russia and selling oil for ruble. But when you see the fact that Saudi Arabia is in negotiations to join the BRICS nations, when you talk about the Klaus Schwab Great Reset, that is it. Because if Saudi Arabia comes out and says, you know, it's been a good run, United States, thank you so much for the 50 years of protection, but we've decided to open up oil sales in the new digital yuan, in rupee, in ruble, in gold, euro, and dollars too. Every single one of the countries on the planet that have had to own dollars in order to buy oil for the past 50 years, a good portion of them are going to dump dollars. When those dollars come flooding home, interest rates spike to the moon. Now, the Federal Reserve claims that they want to get tough on inflation. They have no intention of doing so. They've raised rates by pussyfooting around, raising them to 1.5%. And look at what that's done to the mortgages. Just in a little bit of a raise, the federal funds rate, mortgages have doubled in a year. With inflation at 9%, which is very understated, if they wanted to get tough on inflation like Paul Volcker did in 1980, he raised the federal funds rate to 19.75%. And interesting enough, there was a report that was just published by the National Bureau of Economic Research just the other day, came out and said that the 13.6% inflation rate in June of 1980, if calculated by today's measurements, where they stripped out food, energy, and housing, would be 9.1%. That's exactly what we have. So for us, when we say we have 9.1% inflation, it's north of 13% and probably higher than that.
Yeah.
So by raising the federal funds rate to 1.5%, and even if their next rate hike is by 100 basis points or 1% to 2.5%, that means 2.5% return versus 13.6% inflation. You are negative real terms of 11%. So they're not getting tough on inflation. And I'm going to submit that they have no intention of getting tough on inflation, because when rates, if they were to raise rates above the rate of inflation, just to 10 or 11%, you'd have 15% mortgages. You'd have trillions of dollars of bonds sold at 0 and 1% over the last several years that would be worth 99.5% less. You would have the real estate market implode. It would all blow up. They have no intention of being the entity that destroyed the American way of life. But they have, by weaponizing the dollar, as we've talked about, pushing Russia out of SWIFT, they have sped up the demise of the dollar. And when you see OPEC come out and say, and Saudi Arabia say, you know what, we are in negotiations to join the BRICS nations, which would represent almost 90% of human population when you put them all together. Just the Belt Road Initiative alone, Asia and Africa, is 75% of human population. You start adding all of these countries, and all of these countries are doing the same thing. They are sidestepping the dollar for settlement. And that, when those dollars come home and interest rates spike to the moon, it does just like the commercial banks fooled the managed money into doing the dirty work for them. You could argue, if the U.S. is really hell-bent, if the people pulling the strings are really hell-bent on blowing everything up, resetting everything, this is the exact way to do it. You incentivize the whole world to move away from the dollar, and if you get Saudi Arabia doing this and opening up oil to other purchases within a matter of hours, they're done. Now think about the way Saudi Arabia looks at us. I mean, we're destroying their way of life. we're going fully electric in everything and the end of fossil fuels. So, I mean, it's like to them, we're choosing Iran over Saudi Arabia. Iran just came out the other day and announced that they are fully capable of making a nuclear bomb. So, you know, are we this close to war? Is Israel going to bomb them? Is Saudi Arabia going to go into war with them? Is Saudi Arabia going to coalesce with the BRICS nations because of this? What I'm getting at is that we are this close to all hell breaking loose. And I think the commercial banks know this. And this is why the commercial banks have hoodwinked the managed money into going short, allowing the commercial banks to cover their short positions and start to go long. And look, this is real. It's as real as anything I've ever seen. When I started talking in September of 2021 with Scott about Saudi Arabia signing this joint military cooperation agreement with Russia and what a big deal it was, I had no idea that we would ultimately see them already selling their oil to China for the yuan-denominated petro bond, which is immediately convertible into gold on the Shanghai Gold Exchange. So Saudi Arabia and Nigeria are selling oil to China for yuan and now are talking about coalescing against the dollar and the West with the BRICS nations. You guys, this is as big as it gets. And this is exactly why we want to.
So our country kills the Keystone Pipeline, pulls permits, doesn't allow any kind of fracking, and becomes from energy independent to an energy slave yet again. And we got all these other countries now selling oil to China. And like I said, folks, I told you Andy was going to bring it tonight. If you haven't subscribed, hold on just a second. If you haven't subscribed to us yet, please do so. And more importantly, share this video out, because I think what Andy is saying and going to say here is so important for people to know. Saudi Arabia is the switch. So he's laying it out there for you. When they join BRICS, it's game over. So Andy, thanks for the information, and go ahead and give us what you got.
Two more pieces to add to the puzzle. Over the last 6 months, China has sold $100 billion in treasuries. They are de-dollarizing. They are getting out of harm's way. And just yesterday, Turkey's president, I couldn't pronounce his name if I had to. His last name is Erogin. He's talking to Russia for selling buying Russian energy and selling their stuff in currencies other than the U.S. dollar. So you're getting all of these countries, including those that are U.S. friendly, they're moving away from the dollar. This is what people are too focused on the Federal Reserve and what the Fed is going to do in their next meeting. They're not going to raise rates enough to do anything. In fact, right now we have an inverted yield curve. I'm not going to get in deep to what that means, but that means that the 2-year bond is paying more than the 10-year. And that's not how it's supposed to go. The further out you go, if you borrow someone money and they say, I'll pay you in 2 years, okay, I'll take 2%. If they say, I'll pay you in 10 years, okay, 5%. But what's happened right now, it's the other way around. You're getting less for the 10-year because the big money in this country thinks the Fed is going to blow things up by raising rates just at 1% on the next meeting, and that they're going to ultimately come in and start to reprint and drop interest rates again. When that happens, it's game over. But imagine you're Saudi Arabia selling your precious oil to a country like ours, who the Fed, the big money is saying this is what the Fed's going to do. They're going to reverse course, they're going to pivot, and they're going to lower interest rates again. They've lost all credibility. Why would you ever sell anything of value to a country that is promising you that they're going to choose inflation over the tough decisions, and that is raising rates and getting rid of inflation? So when we give them our dollars, it's losing so much value so fast it makes no sense. They used to buy our treasuries. They're now selling our treasuries because our treasuries are paying 3% on the 10-year treasury, which is a guaranteed loss of 6% per year compounding because they have 9% inflation, which is understated. You have to understand that the Fed is it's a distraction. You have to look what the whole world is doing. And when all of these countries coalesce, you're talking between 75 and 90% of human population, and they're all moving away from the dollar. And it's happening as fast as I could have ever imagined.
Here's a question from Mary real quick, Andy, and then I'm going to make a comment and go to Scott. Mary wants to know when the price of silver and gold start to spike, will that trigger the revaluation of the fiat currencies?
No, it'll happen when when OPEC and Saudi Arabia dump the dollar as the settlement currency for oil. Remember, the only thing that gives the dollar its world reserve status is the fact that OPEC sells oil globally in dollars. That's a losing game for OPEC. And look at all the OPEC countries. I mean, if they decide, if Saudi Arabia ultimately decides to move away from this and start selling oil in other currencies, every currency on the planet has had to own dollars, not because they want to, because they had to own it to buy oil. And if all of a sudden they don't need to do that, and they can buy the yuan, or they can buy the ruble, or the rupee, or whatever it is that OPEC opens it up to, all those dollars come flooding home. And if you think inflation is bad now, remember the United States is 10 to 15% of human population. The rest of the world throws their dollars back at us. We don't want them. The dollar collapses. Inflation goes to the moon. Interest rates spike, and stocks, bonds, and real estate all collapse at the same time. When Klaus Schwab said there's going to be a great reset, I thought he was an idiot. But think about this. If all of the OPEC countries say, we're done taking just dollars, we don't like what's going on in the U.S. and the inflation and the fact that we're losing money in accepting dollars, we're gonna move to the BRICS and take other currencies. Those dollars come home, the dollar collapses, as do stocks, bonds, and real estate as interest rates spike. It's a way for, the only question that I posed to you, Mike, and to Scott and everyone else out there, was this intended? Are our leaders so stupid that they didn't see the consequences of weaponizing the dollar and pushing Russia out of SWIFT? Or did they do it because they wanted a villain? And that villain are the BRICS, Xi, Putin, OPEC, because they know that there's no way they can ever pay off the mountain of debt that we have. And as interest rates rise, everything blows up. So instead of being the ones that light the fuse, just like they blame Putin for inflation, that's not the cause. Inflation always 100% of the time is an increase in the money supply coupled with a decrease in production. What's happened over the last 2 years? Money supply is blown up and we paid everyone to sit on their ass. There's less stuff being produced. So you have way more money chasing way less stuff. It's because the money was blown to sky high levels, 70% of every dollar ever created in the history of this country last year. No, when gold and silver go up, it is a byproduct of the dollar collapsing. And so when the dollar collapses because the rest of the world now no longer needs to hold it to buy oil, that is when we are on our way to a revaluation. And my question is, did they do this purposely? Part of me believes they did, because now they have a villain. They have a villain that they can point to that ruined the American way of life. It certainly wasn't us elite Federal Reserve members and the commercial banks, even though it is them. I think it's something worth pondering. I'd love to get Scott's take if he thinks this was done intentionally, and yours, Mike. Was it done intentionally, or are our leaders just that stupid? And look, our leader perhaps is, but the people pulling his strings, did they do this because they know they have no way out other than to blow everything up, and this gives them an out? Because after all, you could argue the owners of the Federal Reserve, the big old money banks, they're the ones who did this. So now they get off and they can blame the East and OPEC and Russia and China and all of these BRICS nations, and everyone in this country is stupid enough to believe it. Scott, what say you, brother?
You know, I've been saying for 6 to 8 months, you've been on the show, they did this on purpose. This is by design, that they have to have a boogeyman, and it backfired on them hugely. And now you see Putin, what is he doing? He's going around creating all these alliances with all these other countries. While all we can do is sit there and beat the war drums. And all we're doing is we're pumping all this money and weapons over there into Ukraine. It's just turning into a black hole. They're selling the weapons on the black market now. And so we all see this. So yes, I think it was intentional, because they are having to burn down the house on their way out to try to keep from being blamed on all this.
That's right. That's right. And just the other day, Putin came out and said the BRICS nations are joining together to form a new world reserve currency. He just came out and said that. So
I believe it's all on purpose. I believe it was by design. And I think it's because there's people out there, I believe on our side that want to do away with a lot of the bad, and they want to usher in a better system is what I believe. And to your point, Andy, about Saudi Arabia and the Green New Deal, I want to make another comment on that. I want you guys to realize what Andy is telling you is we had a jackass fly over there last week, made an absolute fool out of himself. He made a fool out of America. He came home with nothing. The meme of him standing there with the prince and a gas can is probably true. It's probably not even a meme. It's probably fact. And the fact that his administration and the entire left is pushing this Green New Deal and telling Saudi to their face, you know what? Screw you guys. We're going to go to windmills and electric cars. We don't need your Saudi oil. Saudi ain't in this to help us. I think Andy is spot on 100%. If they could do anything, they're going to hurt us. They're not going to help us. So how are they going to hurt us? They're going to join BRICS, which is going to be the collapse of the Western currency. And there we go. And that's my point.
that's exactly right. And I hate to think that you are right. I hate to think that I'm right, because it's not going to be a pleasant experience. The byproduct of hyperinflation and skyrocketing interest rates is everything around us collapsing. And that's a scary thought.
You know, my biggest question to you, Andy, is how much does a say like an Elon Musk has to come in and buy the silver and clean out the market? We know that there's some big moves kind of starting to go on right now. How much do you think that it would take to come in there and just wipe it out, and then they're just going to have to reprice at that point?
A couple $1 billion, and it's gone. You know, it's a very, very, very small market, and one would wonder why he hasn't done it already. And when you talk about the needs for silver for a guy like Elon Musk or a company like Apple or any of these companies that need silver for their products, at some point there has to be a battle between the industrials and the hedge funds. The hedge funds, at some point, the funds have to realize that when you look at how traditional assets will collapse in a rising interest rate environment, and you look at silver, half of its all-time high, an asset that is so massively needed, and by extension, the government has gone to such great lengths to hold the price down. When the Western system breaks, yeah, the price will go to the moon. But you would have to think that at some point, these guys have to realize that they're foolish not to buy as much as they possibly can right now at these prices to secure the ability to make their products. And at the same time, you got to wonder, I mean, these hedge funds have to look at this. I mean, most of them are short right now, these idiots, but a lot of them, there have to be some of them that say, my God, what a value there is. And then they start to battle where it's for physical delivery. Today, let me see if I wrote this down. I think, I'm not sure, but there has been a massive amount of deliveries in gold and silver this month, which isn't even a delivery month. I'll try to find the numbers, but huge amount of deliveries are coming off the exchange again right now. And it's as if people are waking up. The people that have been holding the price down realize that the game has gotten really, really, really serious. And I think that, you know, there was an interesting statement by Alan Greenspan recently. He said, gold still represents the ultimate form of payment in the world. And fiat money in extremes is accepted by nobody. Gold is always accepted. And basically, he's coming out and saying when things get really, really scary, no one's going to want the dollars, but gold will always be accepted. And I think this is why you're seeing the moves by big money pulling it off the exchanges, by the BRICS nations massively accumulating it. It's happening. It's happening in real time. And Scott, you know, when I had these ideas and started talking about them publicly on your channel over a year ago, I had no idea the way that this would unfold. But if you would have told me that things in a year or less would have progressed to this point right now, where all of these countries are striking deals opposite the dollar and coalescing to form a new world reserve currency, publicly saying that, and the key to our world reserve status is now in negotiations to join BRICS, I would have said, holy shit, that's unbelievable. There's no way that can happen. And it's getting really real. And I think this is something people really need to pay attention to, really, really pay attention to.
Let me answer part of the chat there just real quick, and I'll get back to you, Scott. I wanna let you guys know something that was also concerning to me. I believe Andy brought it to my attention 2 shows ago, I think it was, but I also heard somebody else speak about this, and this wasn't a broker, this wasn't anyone else. This was an average, everyday Joe off the street. Reached out to me the other day and said, Mike, you told me to buy silver. I can't afford to buy a lot, so I went into a pawn store just to buy a coin or two. And he said he went to 3 different pawn shops. They're not selling silver. And I remember that you told us just a while back that you had a friend or something that was in a pawn shop or owned a pawn shop or something. Then they took their silver and put it in the back and was not selling. And it was either you or somebody else that put that out there. So the answer to chat is this: if you can afford a coin or two, grab it. I wouldn't go selling your house or putting a second mortgage on it or trying to sell your birth certificate or cashing in your retirement fully. But if you can buy a little, I would put my hands on some. If you want good service, go through Miles Franklin. You can do that info at milesfranklin.com, because the trigger for me is going to be Saudi Arabia fully engaging in BRICS. And I'm telling you guys this right now. What I heard Andy say, and I believe he's telling you the truth, when that happens, it's only going to be hours, and you're out of time. Listen to me again. When Saudi Arabia signs up with BRICS, you're not going to have enough time to make a purchase. Okay, so if you want to do it, I'm not trying to scare you. I'm just telling you, do it now. You choose to, if you can afford to. Because once that happens, you're not going to be able to call Andy or anybody. And pawn shops, from what I hear, are starting to pull their silver, and that's something that's concerning to me, because they're always a buck. But if they can make more money because they know silver is going to go up, I'm only speculating they're going to pull it and save it for themselves.
Couldn't agree more.
You know, I didn't have all that technical information like Andy does, but just looking at the charts and seeing how it's been stair-stepping down over the past 2 months, basically, it just has the impression that it's coiling up at this point in time, and you can almost like feel it now. And I would like to know, have you seen this type of chart movement in any kind of recent time, or is this kind of almost like beginning to be a first as far as a chart that's kind of developing like this? What do you think, Andy?
I think that they have pushed it below the moving averages specifically. I think, again, go back to what I was saying earlier. The commercial banks were in a very precarious position. Look, when everyone wants dollars and no one's worried about what's happening globally, you can manipulate the gold market. You can manipulate it without much trouble at all. But when the whole world is moving against the dollar, it becomes a very dangerous thing. And I think the commercial banks have hoodwinked the managed money into going short, and they continue to pile on the shorts, just like the traders did with GameStop, just like they did with AMC. They're piling on the short side, and that is pushing the price lower and lower and lower and lower. And as that happens, the commercial banks are taking the other side, that they are trying to sucker as much of short selling out of the managed money as they humanly possibly can. And that might mean capping rallies. That might be doing anything to avoid the price starting to take off when we think it should, even if it even if it comes with record 40-year inflation. So look, you also have a really strong dollar right now. Why is the dollar strong? The dollar is strong. You have a tail of $2 here in the US. It's really weak because it's so inflated, but inflation is all over the globe right now. And so a lot of the countries around the world who are experiencing 6 or 7% inflation, they look at the dollar that's gone up 15% and they're buying dollars, because even though they have 6 or 7% inflation, they're making money in the appreciation of the dollar, and the 2% interest that they're getting is gravy. So they're ahead. And so this has created a short-term rally in the dollar. But if you look at almost every other currency on the planet, gold and silver are almost at all-time highs. It's the abnormal, ridiculous strength of the dollar that is supported by nothing, that has really also at the same time made gold and silver look so cheap. But in terms of that stepping down on top of a strong dollar, where commodities and gold and silver are valued in dollars, it's because the commercial banks are trying really, really hard. All those stairs are spots where the commercial banks are covering their shorts. They have shorts that go the whole way up. So they keep incentivizing, yeah, you guys are right, keep shorting. And we're going to, cap the rally so that the managed money shorts it some more. They drive the price down, the commercial banks cover. Yeah, you guys are right, keep shorting. And they keep shorting it all the way down, enabling the commercial banks, let me say it one more time, to have the smallest short position in the history of the commodity exchange. This is something that I've never seen before, because the commercial banks are always short, always. Right now, they're nearly net long. They still have some shorts because they haven't got out of them all, but they are trying to fleece as much money out of the managed money as they humanly possibly can by allowing the price to continue to step down. And when that happens, the commercial banks have no other way to cover those short positions unless they drive the price down themselves. They're letting the managed money do the work for them, and they're happy to let it happen. And to your point, it is coiling. Their long position is coiling. And all it will take is one event where the price starts to move, and then the commercial banks actually add to their long positions. The covering by those hedge funds will be unlike anything anyone has ever seen, where you'll see the price of gold move up $100 or $200 or $300 in a day. You'll see the price of silver move up $5 in a day. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but you will see that. I do believe that.
Wow. This is historic. In other words, and I'm paying attention to what Andy says, because I just don't want to be blind about any of this stuff. Believe it, don't believe it. But man, get some education here. This guy is dropping intelligent information to you guys, and so is Scott. I got a question for Scott. Scott, there are yes, it's biblical. There are all kinds of countries around the world that are starting to collapse. We've seen I'm hearing Venezuela. I heard keep an eye on Cuba. Mary, I had a conversation with her just yesterday. She's talking about Panama and watch Panama and a lot of things going on. I just got word tonight that Italy's PM maybe Boris Johnson stepped down. I heard Canada's guy maybe stepping down. Just seems like the world is like poised for this massive collapse, suckhole, whatever you want to call it. Like everything's just going to drop like a house of cards. What's your thoughts on that, Scott?
Of course, it's all setting up, and you see all the players on the board. It's being rearranged. All these leaders in the countries that are, these corrupt leaders, and they're being taken out. They fleece their people, and the people are mad. They're uprising. You see riots all over the place. And now you're seeing, like I said, these alliances with these other countries, and they're starting to pay attention. They're like, why can't we have this over here? How come we can't have something like, China or Russia or all this other stuff? They're, regardless, they may have some of their problems or whatever, but they're not starving their people to death. And now they're starting to revolt. And as they revolt, and then you're kind of starting, to feel the tension here. And you're hearing a lot of chatter about Trudeau. He's going to be one of those other ones where they're going to be chasing him down the street. And when you start seeing it, you can't deny it. You see it all over the place. And so I think it's definitely coming. And once it the ball has already started rolling. Now it's just picking up momentum at this point. And as we see, you know, the way the economies are basically collapsing all around, where else are they going to go? They can't, you know, rely on the dollar anymore. Everybody's running from that. So they're all having to try to rearrange their assets. You're seeing the mortgage rates go through the roof again. And it's all, the whole thing is coming unwound, and it's coming unwound quick. And I'm actually cheering it on at this point.
Yeah,
And
the
mortgage rates have doubled in a year with the federal funds rate at 1.5%. What happens if they try to kill inflation? They'd have to raise the rates above the 9% level of inflation to 10, 11, 12%, which means you'd have mortgage rates at 15, 16, 17%. Can you only imagine what that does to the real estate market? It vaporizes it. And the worst part about it is that all these people with the rates that have doubled, so you're sitting on a house that's doubled and you think, I'm going to sell it and I'm going to cash in. But where are you going to go? Because even if you're going to downsize a little bit, unless you have enough cash to buy it outright, you're in trouble, because you're going to pay double what you paid a year ago in mortgages. If you're locked into a 3 or a 4% mortgage, you're never going to see those numbers ever again, in my opinion. And so, you know, with 30-year mortgage at about 7% right now, what happens if it doubles? And how does it go from 3 to 7 with the federal funds rate only going from 0 to 1.5? What happens when it goes to 5 or 6? You're still at 3% below their bullshit inflation number. You're negative 3%. What if they peg it at 6 or 7? The federal funds rate, you're going to have double-digit mortgages. What does that do to the mortgage rate? What does that do to someone who wants to sell their house? No one's going to be able to afford it. The prices are going to come down. And even if you were able to get out right now and then wanted to go move somewhere else and take out a mortgage, your mortgage is going to be double what it was a year ago in terms of 3 to almost 7 right now.
Wow. Andy, one of the questions from our viewers on Facebook out of Australia, Kathy Taylor, she wanted to know if Miles Franklin can help people purchase precious metals out of Australia. And if not, is there somebody that you would suggest to them?
So I can send 24 karat gold to Australia. Sending silver to Australia is very expensive and carries a VAT tax. There are some companies, I think the company that I would call, I think it's called ABC Gold. You can also try to go right to the Perth Mint, to their window, and buy directly. They do sell to the public to a degree. But I believe it's ABC Gold. I'm almost positive that's what it is. There are precious metals companies in Australia. Paying the shipping of silver across the Atlantic is extraordinarily expensive through air, and then a VAT tax makes it prohibitive. So I think it's ABC Gold, and that would be the one that I would chat to. There's a gal that works there. Her name is Shay Russell, and she used to work for Agora. We've done some interviews together. She represents their company, and she says that they're very, very honorable. So wish I could give you better news, but it wouldn't make sense to pay the exorbitant shipping costs and a VAT tax to get into silver into Australia.
All right. Thanks for answering that question. I don't care which one takes this one, Scott or Andy. What do you guys know about the HR 5404? I'm unaware of it, so I'm curious to know what John Esterbrooks is talking about.
I have no idea.
I don't know what it is either.
All right. We'll here's one out of the chat. I have a question, Mike. Can I move my 401k around? Should I move it to gold and silver? I know that question gets asked an awful lot. And Andy does give you guys suggestions. And I think they're pretty solid suggestions as well. If anybody want to cover that, go ahead.
Scott, you want to take it?
Well, you know, the best thing to do is what I tell everybody is just call New Direction and ask them the questions, because all these 401ks, there's like a whole variety of these things. So call them, ask them some seem to be, while you're still working, you can possibly move, and then some of them you just can't at all. So that's where I kind of get stuck on some of that stuff. Is like, if you're currently employed and have that 401k, you're going to have to call and check to see if they will allow you to be able to move it into one of those, oh, what is it called? I forgot.
Self-directed IRA.
Self-directed IRA. Thank you.
Yep.
Then once you can move it over into that, then all you have to do is pick the depository, and then you should be good to go. If you're able to do that, you're golden. If you can't, you're just kind of trapped. And that's where a lot of people are stuck. If it's an old 401k, you're not working there, you're retired, absolutely, you can move it. But you got to get on that, because some of these other companies, they don't like to release your money. And I've seen it take up to 3 weeks before people could get it moved over into New Direction to get that account funded. So that's your short answer.
That's exactly right. And if you have a 401k and you no longer are employed and you've been lazy and just left it there, regardless of whether or not you buy precious metals within a self-directed IRA, you need to move it out of a 401k and into a self-directed IRA so you can control where the money goes and not just leave it into a basket of choices that a 401k represents. 401k is like a mutual fund, basically. They give you 10 or 12 choices that are allocations to specific parts of investing. Some could be bonds, some could be, high growth with risk, some could be a money market or whatever. Move it out of there into a self-directed IRA and you choose where it goes, whether it be gold and silver, common stocks, whatever it is you want, you can do that.
Go ahead, Scott.
I would say silver is your best bet, because if you're going with that ratio, what is it? 95 to 1 now is the ratio, 95 to 1. That's where there's people that are swapping their gold in for silver just to play the ratio alone. And that's a huge move.
It is.
That is a big move. That's a big move. HR 5404 would define the dollar as a fixed weight of gold.
Yeah, it always was defined as a fixed weight of gold. I don't know if that's a new bill and who's proposing it, but it always was defined as a fixed weight of gold. And I think when the dust settles, it will be once again. The only way that we can ever come back from this would be to peg gold to a new currency. It won't be convertible like it was in before 1933, where you could walk into a bank with these pictures behind me. It's you see right here. That's a $10 gold certificate, and that's a $10 gold coin. Prior to 1933, you could walk into a bank and exchange the two. That ain't going to happen. President de Gaulle from France drained all the gold out of the system, and I think they won't allow convertibility. He proved the convertible currencies convert. But here's your central bank digital currency, where if they are going to peg it to gold, they will use the distributed ledger technology to do that, which brings me back to the BRICS nations. China has done 12 billion in successful transactions on their new digital yuan. Most of it on the new Belt Road program, but they even were doing it during their last Olympics. You had to use it on your phone, give you like a QR code. But the point of it is that they've had success to the point of at least 12 billion in successful transactions. If all of these countries, they're all the big ones that produce gold and accumulate it. China, Russia, India, South Africa, Russia. These are the countries that own all the gold, right? So if they peg their gold to a new world reserve currency, like Putin said, they will peg it on top of the success. They'll use the technology that the Chinese have already refined, and that's their new digital yuan. They'll call it a digital BRICS, and they'll use the distributed ledger technology to show the veracity of the gold that they've all pledged. And so I think that's where distributed ledger technology comes into focus. Forget about the central bank digital currency and all the horrific things that come with that, the loss of privacy when, you pay your babysitter $40 in cash. Well, it ain't going to happen anymore. Now you're going on the digital ledger, So, but when you talk about using it to show the immutability and the veracity of the gold that everyone's pledged to backstop the currency, it's a big deal. if something like that were to happen on top of Saudi Arabia and OPEC dumping the dollar, I mean, it would literally send us back to the Stone Ages. And I think the only hope for the U.S. at that point would be to follow suit. The only problem is Fort Knox hasn't been audited since 1956, but one needs to wonder, where did the Iraqi gold go? Where did the Libyan gold go? We already know that 12 billion in gold was just sold by the Ukrainians. Who's taking all that? Is it the U.S.? Is that why we're protecting them? Is that why we're involved the way we are? Don't know. But I'm simply saying that you'll never trust, nobody will ever trust central banks ever again, especially if the Fed comes in and pivots and goes back to inflation like the inverted yield curve is suggesting. No one will ever trust them ever again. And I think the only way to remove that risk is to put an ankle bracelet on them, and that's gold, tethering to a reserve currency, and that's where the central bank digital currency or the distributed ledger technology, in my mind, comes into play. Yes, here it is. You can see it. It's on the ledger, and it's audited by the big three, and it's kept in the Swiss vault or whatever. However they play it out. It's the only way that currency ever works again, in my opinion.
Wow. Andy, speaking about distributed ledger, everybody's always talked about XRP being backed by gold and XLM being backed by silver. This has been running in the circles for a long time. Chatter. It wouldn't be that hard. Well, let me ask you like this. Would it be that hard to go ahead and peg XRP to gold and to be able to use it, because they're basically getting rid of the SWIFT system? A lot of these banks are already moving over to XRP. That's pretty well known in a lot of circles. What are your thoughts of that being a reality?
I think that they would nationalize the technology. I mean, I don't think they would allow it to be done on a decentralized system. So that's the only issue. This has to be centralized. It cannot be decentralized and run by a central bank. So the technology, they may just make the holders of it very wealthy and say, fine, we now own the technology, here's your money for it, and you're now all rich. But they're not going to allow open source, decentralized platforms to run the world reserve currency. And I think that, or a U.S. central bank currency, but I could see them, nationalizing or through eminent domain taking XRP technology, paying everyone in worthless dollars, and then issuing a new system. I mean, I'm not trying to rain on the parade because the technology is real. The question that I would ask is, how do you ever allow a decentralized platform? And I'm assuming XRP is. How do you, I don't know, but I'm not big into cryptos enough to know anything about it. But if it is decentralized, it ain't going to work. It has to be centralized. So it's not a true crypto. I mean, it's the technology of the ledger that matters most. And if XRP is the best way to do it, great. They're going to take it and they're going to pay for it, hopefully. But they're going to centralize it and close the doors so they're not open to be hacked or those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So hypothetically, it could happen if the government was to come in there and take control of it, is what you're basically saying then.
Yes, exactly. It's the only way. It's the only way it's going to happen. They're not going to let everyone else toy with something that holds the whole gold supply of the United States.
Makes sense. I got a question for Scott. And then we'll roll into final thoughts after Scott answers the question. Scott, I got word today, an article just came out that did you realize that, he goes by Michelle Obama, her, I don't know what you call him, mother passed away today, yesterday. Did you hear about that?
Negative.
Okay, well, in the article, it stated that in the will, the mother had left everything she owned to Michael.
Okay.
Not Michelle, Michael.
Right,
Just saying. thought maybe you would find that funny.
It is funny, I admit.
Old Big Mike strikes again. All right, gentlemen, I need to roll into final thought here. I appreciate both of you being on with me tonight, and we need to do this again here real soon, especially when we're keeping an eye on bricks and everything else. So I'll get you guys scheduled here real soon. I know, Andy, you were planning on coming on Ladies of Liberty with Tammy. Yeah, that'd be probably a good time actually to have you come back. So,
Sure.
gentlemen, I'll let Andy go first for final thought, and then I'll finish up with old Scott. We like it when Scott ends the show.
Look, I mean, I guess all I got to say is that never in history have markets been so overvalued, and never has there been anywhere near the level of debt outstanding anywhere in the world. And when this everything bubble pops, it's going to be earth shaking. I think people need to prepare, because that is exactly what a good portion of the world is doing right now out from underneath us. When no one's paying attention, our leaders are more concerned about the January 6th nonsense,
Yeah.
and instead of fixing what ails this country. So I think that unfortunately this is becoming a whole lot more real than I find comfortable, and I don't take any comfort in being right. In fact, I'm a little surprised by just how right I've been, because it's starting to get a little bit too real for me and a little bit too frightening. So again, I do think, before this is all said and done, my market, if anything puts me out of business, it'll be the fact I can't get any product. And that's not going to happen until we start to see markets start to really shake. And when they do, if only 5% allocation to precious metals is put into place across the financial matrix in this country, that's a tenfold increase in demand. In a matter of days, there will be nothing to buy, nothing. So get what you can while you can, or all of the companies like mine are going to turn into the pawn shops, and they're going to keep everything in the back room and just close the doors. So get while you can, and it's not an investment. It's not to get rich. It's wealth. It has been for 5,000 years, and we'll make it through this. But I think you have to start to pay off all your variable debt. Start to protect your family by preparing food, a gun, water, all the things you need to prepare. And that also means financially. And whether it's $500 or $5,000 or any amount of money you can put into precious metals, I think in the end, you'll be glad that you did.
I couldn't agree with you more, Andy. As I give my final thought here and then go to Scott, now's the best time ever, folks. We've been talking about with Andy for almost a year here. I know a lot of you have already grabbed some silver. Some of you, I realize your situation. If there is a pawn shop near you, grab a coin or two if you can. Reach out to Andy, Scott, and the Miles Franklin team at info@milesfranklin.com. And you guys can use the promo code Liberty Warrior Nation, which helps me out here, helps keep the lights on. We appreciate everything that Miles Franklin does and everything that you guys, the listeners, do as well. And my final thought is this. If Big Mike is listening to LWN right now, man, you just hit a windfall, and you got some money in your pocket. Hey, reach out to Miles Franklin at info@milesfranklin.com. And hey, Big Mike, use promo code Liberty Warrior Nation. I'd really appreciate it. Get your hands on some silver instead of, well, I'll leave it right there. Scott, would you go ahead and usher us out?
Sure. Absent all the technical information that Andy brought to the table, which is a plethora of information, you can just look at the charts and see how it's steadily been going down. And this week has almost been like a dead cat bounce. This is probably one of the best times to move some of your assets over into metals that you're going to find. Probably this is going to be one of those times. It's going to be the last time. I keep saying the window is going to close, and it's getting glaringly obvious. And as this is coiling up, because it is coiling up, you can feel the tension. And once this does pop, it is going to, it's going to be, something that you wished you'd have got in on, just even, it doesn't matter how much it is, but you'll wish that you had protected some of your, where are you going to go? You can't go anywhere else with your money at this point in time. Metals is the only option that anybody really has. And I'm firmly convinced that we're on the cusp. We're getting very, very close. And as you can just see how all the world's events are popping, how all the alliances are, what the U.S. is basically doing to just destroy this country outright, giving $40 billion over there to Ukraine, and they're talking about giving more, and they don't care about you. If you think they do, you're just pissing in the wind. So I'm telling you, what experience that I have in this, which I'm not going to say is nowhere near as much as Andy's, he's telling you what's going on. I'm telling you what I see from a whole different side, but it's all coming and it's all converging in one point, and it's getting real close. So I think it's the best time ever. And anybody that's not paying attention to this, I don't know what to tell you after this. I mean, the information has been out there. We've been talking about it for a long time, but all the stuff that's been said for over right close to 2 years now, it's all come true, and it's no bullshit. So you better get your house in order, and you better get your mind right. And once you get that, 90% of it is all mental. And that's where a lot of this is at. So other than that, best I can tell you is stay frosty. Donald Trump's a fucking genius.
All right, gentlemen. Thanks for joining us tonight. As always, it's been a pleasure. And everybody else listening tonight, it was fun to have you here. I hope you guys learned something, picked something up, and took something away from this show. We will catch you tomorrow night for Ladies of Liberty. Don't miss out. Tammy the Hammer Nation, Mary Kay, love you all. Have a great night.
Hoping for a sincere performance, but open to finding the moment, to finding out where I'm headed now. Looking for a sign of disaster, so I can make it there faster. I'm weighing the consequences out. I can see in all directions. It's all open to interpretation, but I see colors that are breaking from the other side, the other side. When I make mountains out of summer trails, when I buckle under all the details, I'll keep going till I make it to the other side, the other side. Can you tell me the secret of how you can take it or leave it? How you can blend in with the crowd? I'm so scared, so damn afraid to look. I'm so sick of talking. I'm wearing the words out, words out. I can see in all directions. It's all open to interpretation, but I see colors that are breaking from the other side, the other side. When I make mountains out of summer trails, when I buckle under all the details, I'll keep out to get me. I see the river on the back